It seems like such a long time ago, 2017. We're only one quarter into 2018. I'd say probably three things stick in my head. So last year, I managed to take 2 months off to go back to school. So that was a defining period for me because I was out of markets, out of business for 7-8 weeks. And there was a before and after moment. But I remember coming back to work feeling somewhat relieved that volatility had finally bottomed out, or so it seemed, right? We've been saying that for 2-3 years. So the first thing, I think my strongest memory of 2017 will be where hopefully we reach some kind of base in terms of risk transfer, in terms of price formation, in terms of volatility across asset classes, in terms of, I guess, what they call it today, financial oppression by central banks. What was specifically interesting in the franchise that we represent was that emerging markets became a thing again. For a long time, emerging markets was where you put the countries that couldn't be called developed. Once upon a time, they used to be called lesser developed countries. But now, emerging markets is something different. Right? First of all, 2/3 of emerging markets is Asia. But more importantly, the technology weight, that sector of tech, in emerging markets is bigger than it is in the S&P 500. And that's just because in Taiwan and Korea, you've got people who make mobile phones, you've got people who make the chips, you've got companies like Tencent, which have just got 1 billion users on WeChat. So the rally, the investment, the chasing of investment dollars into emerging markets was driven by the technology sector. And that was something that was very different and unique. The spin-off benefit of that movement for us is that actually a lot of the news flow in the tech sector comes when the US is awake. And that's why a lot of the trading of the products that we have in emerging markets happened in the overnight session. And this was a good thing for us because last year was when we pushed into the US in terms of marketing, distribution, and client service in a big way. And I think that showed a lot in the volumes and the activity we had in the overnight session. One of the concerns that we have, which was a second order concern, was that heading into 2018, there was a lot of client resources and regulatory resources which were devoted to making sure that people aligned with and were ready for MiFID II. So that isn't a hurdle anymore. Of course, the next thing people talk about is readiness for Brexit. And the truth is, in the markets that we operate in, people always have a priority number 1, 2, and 3. And our job is to make sure that we're somewhere up that list of priorities in terms of making it onto either a bank or a client or a dealer or a market maker or a buy-side client's agenda. The way we have to do that, just because of the scale we represent or the niche that we represent, if you think of the global markets network, SGX occupies a relatively small space near the edge of the network, where we're much closer to the Asian underlying markets and slightly further away geographically from the end investor. So we need to make sure that we bridge that gap. One of the obvious ways of doing so is making sure we have people on the ground talking to clients 24 hours a day. The second thing is just to make sure we make maximum use of technology and workflow optimization so that we are embedded very smoothly into people's trading cycles and clearing cycles. And to this day, we are the only US dollar exchange in Asia. People forget that the exchange in Hong Kong is a Hong Kong dollar exchange, the exchange in Australia is an Aussie dollar exchange, the exchange in Japan is a yen exchange, right? SGX is a US dollar exchange. And that makes it much, much easier for us because dollars is the risk transport currency for margins, for futures in general, for a lot of the global institutional clients that we deal with. So it's a commitment we've made. It helps a great deal that Boon Chai, our current CEO, has done this for real. You know, he's done this in the banking business, in the markets business. There is an understanding that if our job is to serve institutional clients in the US and in Europe, we have to be much closer to the ground. We have to bring the onboarding process much closer to the ground, right? So while the world's becoming more connected, technology's more great, people still sleep, the sun still rises and sets, and we need to make sure that we're operational 24 hours a day. And the best way of doing that is a combination of man and machine, if you like, to make sure that we're there to service the clients where they're needed. As importantly, a lot of the business development we do needs to be on the ground, because a lot of the innovation, while there's a good amount of fintech type innovation in Singapore, a lot of the key thinkers and agenda drivers, the thought leaders, are actually out here. Right? They're in Chicago, they're in New York, they're in London, they're in Palo Alto, and 27 hours door to door is the time it takes me to fly from home to here. Can't do that more than twice a year. So having people on the ground makes a great deal of sense.